Speed and Nguyen's Deep Dive podcast is an official podcast made by Speed and Nguyen with the voice made from Google's Notebook LM. Do not reproduce our podcast without permissions from the owner. Welcome to the Speed and Nguyen's Deep Dive podcast.
Yeah.
So last week, AMC's servers just completely melted down.
Oh, yeah. Total chaos.
Millions of people found themselves stuck in these hour-long digital queues. But they weren't trying to get tickets for the latest Marvel movie.
Right.
And they weren't waiting for, a Taylor Swift concert either. They crashed the internet trying to get a front row seat to a story about a veteran trying to get home to his wife.
Yeah, a story that was written, 3,000 years ago?
Exactly, 3,000 years ago. So today we are taking a massive stack of sources ranging from summaries of that ancient Greek epic poem to reviews of this radical feminist stage play, right up to the unprecedented hype and, cultural controversy surrounding Christopher Nolan's upcoming $250 million IMAX blockbuster.
It's a lot to cover.
It is, and we are synthesizing all of it. Because whether you are a die-hard film buff trying to understand this crazy box office phenomenon, or just someone who wants to sound incredibly well-informed about the biggest cultural event of the summer, this deep dive is going to give you the ultimate shortcut to understanding the Odyssey.
That's the goal.
Okay, let's unpack this, because before we jump into the modern Hollywood frenzy, we really have to lay down that 3,000-year-old groundwork.
For sure, yeah.
So for anyone who hasn't been in a high school literature class recently, what is actually happening in this story?
Well, to truly appreciate the cultural earthquake happening right now, we have to look closely at that original blueprint. The Odyssey, traditionally attributed to the ancient Greek poet Homer, actually picks up 10 years after the end of the Trojan War.
Right, so a long time after the actual war.
Exactly. You have Odysseus, the legendary king of Ithaca, and he is essentially stranded. He's trapped on the island of the nymph Calypso. But the story doesn't just focus on him.
Right, because things are really bad back home, too.
Very bad. Back in his home kingdom of Ithaca, society has devolved into complete chaos. His wife, Penelope, is dealing with this horde of ruthless, arrogant suitors. And they're led by a particularly nasty guy named Antinous.
So they've basically staged, a massive home invasion, right?
That is exactly what it is.
I mean, they are eating all the livestock, drinking all the wine, and demanding Penelope marry one of them because they just assume Odysseus died at sea.
That is the exact situation. And, caught in the crossfire of this home invasion is their son, Telemachus.
Oh, right.
This is a crucial, often overlooked part of the epic called the Telemachy. Telemachus was just an infant when his father left for Troy, so now he's a teenager coming of age in a house held hostage by toxic, violent men.
That sounds terrifying.
It is. He doesn't even know his father. He only knows the overwhelming legend of his father. So the story actually kicks off with this traumatized kid traveling to places like Pylos and Sparta.
Looking for clues?
Yeah, desperately searching for news of his dad. But on a deeper psychological level, he is just trying to figure out what masculinity and leadership even look like, especially when his only role models are the men trying to steal his inheritance.
Wow, it is such a grounded, intensely human setup. You've got a single mom dealing with a terrifying situation and a fatherless kid trying to find his identity.
Very relatable even today.
Yeah, that feels so much more modern than a story about sea monsters and angry gods.
Yeah.
But engaging with that text today is where things get complicated, right? Because reading the Odyssey now depends entirely on whose translation you happen to pick up off the shelf.
Oh, absolutely. It fundamentally alters the DNA of the story. For decades, the gold standard in academia was Richmond Lattimore's 1967 translation.
Okay.
And Lattimore prioritized a strictly literal adherence to the Greek meter and structure. It is highly formal, very dense, and honestly, it reads like an ancient artifact.
Right. Very heavy.
But the entire literary conversation shifted seismically in 2018 with Emily Wilson's groundbreaking translation. She was actually the first woman to ever publish an English translation of the poem.
Which is just a wild statistic to think about. It took until 2018 for a woman to translate this foundational text. And her approach wasn't just like a minor update. It was a complete stylistic overhaul.
A total revelation. Wilson deliberately strips away the ornate, romanticized language that translators like Lattimore really relied on.
Hmm.
She uses clean, direct syntax to force the reader to look at the ugly realities of the Bronze Age. Like, the most famous example from our sources involves the ancient Greek word demeure.
Right.
Older translators often rendered that word as handmaid or serving woman.
Which gives it this polite, almost Downton Abbey vibe, you know? It really softens the dynamic.
Exactly the problem. It hides the brutality. Wilson translates it using the historically accurate word, which is slave.
Wow.
Yeah. Suddenly, you aren't reading a polite Victorian romance. You are reading about an ancient warlord's compound where human beings are treated as property.
That is a massive shift in tone.
And she also fundamentally shifts how we view Odysseus himself, right from the opening line. The original Greek uses the word polytropos to describe him.
Polytropos.
Yeah, it's a famously slippery word. It can mean many turning or resourceful or cunning, but it can also mean shifty or deceptive.
So it's not entirely positive.
Not at all. Wilson leans into that darker complexity. She presents a complicated, sometimes manipulative survivor, not a flawless superhero.
I love this. It actually makes me think of music. Like, translating a text like this is essentially like covering a classic song.
Oh, that's a great way to look at it.
Right.
Yeah.
Because Lattimore is trying to play it on the original 3,000-year-old instruments, which sounds authentic but maybe a bit distant, whereas Wilson is doing a live, unplugged acoustic set so you can actually hear the lyrics.
Exactly.
But I do have to push back a little here. If you make the language too accessible and strip away all that ornate poetry, don't you risk losing the epic grandeur that readers expect? Like, doesn't it just sound like a regular conversation instead of a myth?
What's fascinating here is that our very concept of epic grandeur is a modern cinematic misconception.
Really?
Yeah, Homer's original audience didn't consume this by reading silent, dense text in a dusty library. They heard it performed out loud in a crowded hall.
Oh, right. It was an oral tradition.
Exactly. The original Greek language wasn't permanently lofty or distant. It was vivid, direct, and highly conversational. The characters insulted each other, they complained, they cried. So by using clean, accessible English, Wilson's syntax arguably recreates the engaging, fast-paced rhythm of an ancient oral performance much better than stuffy, formal English ever could.
I never thought about it that way. So she isn't dragging the text into the modern era. She's actually removing the Victorian filter so it hits our ears the exact way it hit the original Greek audience.
Spot on.
And if Wilson's translation forces us to look at the unromantic reality of the language, it feels like that perfectly sets the stage for how modern creators are forcing us to look at the unromantic reality of the story itself.
Absolutely. The mythology is no longer treated as sacred and untouchable. Creators are actively wrestling with it now.
Which brings us to the stage adaptations. The sources highlight this incredible indie theater adaptation by Kate Hamill that recently played at the American Repertory Theater.
Yes.
And she takes this epic and completely deconstructs it. I mean, it is a fiercely feminist critique of the entire heroic tradition.
Oh, completely. Hamill's play flips the power dynamics upside down. Instead of the traditional Greek gods pulling the strings from Mount Olympus, she introduces the Fates as the ultimate arbiters of the story.
The Fates, okay.
And the Fates represent the countless women Odysseus encounters. They literally look down on the stage with this cynical sneer, repeatedly moaning poor Odysseus whenever he complains about his struggles.
Wow, just mocking him.
Yeah, it forces the audience to view his journey through a lens of extreme female skepticism.
And the portrayal of the men who fought at Troy is completely stripped of its glory, too. They aren't tactical geniuses. The play depicts them as violent, sometimes ridiculous figures.
Yeah, very much so.
Like, I read that the famous scene with the sirens is staged almost like a slapstick Keystone Cops routine because the men just keep eagerly falling for every single obvious trap.
Right, but under that layer of physical comedy, the play does something deeply unsettling. It shifts the entire focus to the barbaric trauma of war.
Oh, how so?
Well, that contrast is the emotional engine of Hamill's adaptation. The comedy suddenly drops away to reveal the collateral damage of Odysseus's so-called glory. There's a devastating sequence featuring a shadow puppet show.
A shadow puppet show about Troy.
Yes, and it depicts the horrors of the sack of Troy, but instead of focusing on the victorious soldiers, the puppets highlight the women and children left behind in the burning city. It visualizes the human cost.
That sounds incredibly heavy.
It is, and Hamill completely rewrites the ending to grant the women total agency. In her version, Nausicaa, that's the young princess who finds Odysseus washed ashore, she listens to his excuses about his violent past and flat out rejects him.
So says no.
Yep. And Penelope refuses to wait around as a passive prize either. She actually chooses to marry the suitor Amphinomus.
Wow, that is such a radical, intimate way to dismantle the myth. But then we pivot to the complete opposite end of the entertainment spectrum.
We really do.
We go from a stripped-down indie stage critique to Christopher Nolan's upcoming July 17th, 2026 blockbuster. I mean, this is a $250 million gritty spectacle shot entirely on enormous IMAX cameras.
Yeah, Nolan is operating on a scale that is almost unfathomable for a classical adaptation. Universal Pictures is treating this like the next Avengers or Avatar.
Seriously.
And the casting reflects that ambition. You have Matt Damon stepping into the role of Odysseus, Anne Hathaway anchoring the film as Penelope, and Tom Holland playing the traumatized son, Telemachus.
Not to mention Robert Pattinson. The early reviews are already singling him out. He's playing Antanos, the lead suitor who invades Penelope's home, and critics are saying he delivers this terrifying, scene-stealing villain run.
I've heard that too.
Plus, the marketing for this has just been wild. There was a massive 6-minute prologue of the Trojan horse sequence that played exclusively in IMAX theaters right before Avatar, Fire and Ash. Critics were comparing it to Nolan's work in Dunkirk.
And this is where the mechanics of Nolan's filmmaking become so crucial, because he didn't use CGI for the Trojan horse.
Of course he didn't.
Right, he built a massive practical wooden structure, put his actors inside it, and filmed them with incredibly loud, bulky 70mm cameras. He isn't just showing you a cool trick, he is physically capturing the stifling claustrophobia, the sweating, and the sheer terror of the soldiers waiting in the dark.
Oh, man.
Yeah, it turns a mythic victory into a terrifying survival horror sequence.
But here's where it gets really interesting. If the true core of this story, as we just discussed with the stage play, is actually about PTSD, the trauma of violence, and the quiet, agonizing struggle of just trying to reconnect with your family, doesn't a stripped-down indie play capture that emotional intimacy way better than a massive $250 million explosion fest? Like, can Nolan really find the human heartbeat inside a machine that massive?
It is a totally valid concern, and honestly, it's the exact trap that most Hollywood epics fall into. They let the spectacle crush the story.
Exactly.
But if we look at the early reactions from the London premiere, Nolan appears to have used the scale to his advantage. Critics are overwhelmingly calling the film a staggering achievement.
Wow, really?
Yeah, one reviewer specifically described it as a less despairing Oppenheimer follow-up about a man haunted by his own arrogance. The consensus is that Nolan uses those jaw-dropping practical effects and that immense IMAX screen not to distract from the characters, but to amplify the psychological drama.
Okay, I see.
The external chaos mirrors Odysseus's internal fight.
So the giant IMAX camera is essentially acting as a magnifying glass for his PTSD.
Yes, perfectly put.
That makes a lot of sense. But, of course, you cannot make a movie this massive about a text this foundational without generating a massive amount of cultural friction.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, anytime you adapt a sacred cultural text, intense debate is inevitable. People feel a deep personal sense of ownership over these myths.
And we are seeing that play out aggressively online right now. There are 3 major controversies dominating the discourse around Nolan's film. Now, as we unpack these casting debates, just to be crystal clear with you listening, we aren't here to endorse either side of this online war.
No, not at all.
Our goal is just to impartially map out the cultural friction we're seeing in these source materials.
Precisely. We are just looking at the shape of the debate. So
Yeah.
the first major point of contention is a casting of non-Greek actors in the primary roles. You have Zendaya playing the goddess Athena, Charlize Theron in a major supporting role, and Matt Damon as the lead. Because none of them are of Greek descent, it has sparked significant complaints from audiences who feel the production is ignoring the specific geographic and cultural heritage of the original text.
Okay, and the second controversy involves the dialogue itself.
Right.
Instead of adopting British accents or attempting authentic Greek accents, the entire cast speaks in plain, natural American accents.
Yep, that's definitely causing a stir. And the third, which has really generated the most intense wave of online backlash, surrounds the casting of Lupita Nyong'o as Helen of Troy.
Right, and again, just objectively reporting the facts of the debate found in our sources, figures like Elon Musk and various online commentators have voiced significant upset over this casting choice, arguing it breaks historical immersion. But then, on the exact opposite side of the spectrum, major pop culture publications like Salon and the Mary Sue have strongly defended Nyong'o. They've published essays that explicitly label the backlash against her casting as fundamentally racist. I mean, it is an incredibly polarized environment.
It really is. And this raises an important question about adaptation itself. It highlights how deeply people internalize their own personal visions of mythological figures and how explosive the reaction becomes when a modern director challenges those ingrained visual assumptions.
Let's focus strictly on that accent debate for a second, though, because the mechanics of that fascinate me.
Okay, yeah.
People are legitimately furious that Matt Damon sounds like Matt Damon in ancient Greece. But isn't wanting British accents for ancient Greeks just a bizarre Hollywood trope?
Complete.
Like, why do audiences inherently accept that ancient Romans or Greeks should sound like they just walked out of a pub in London?
It is a completely artificial cinematic shorthand. Hollywood trained us to associate British accents with things that are old and important. But if we circle right back to what we discussed earlier with Emily Wilson's translation, Homer's oral tradition wasn't formal or aristocratic. It was accessible, gritty, and immediate to the people listening in the room.
Oh, that makes sense.
So, in a strange way, Nolan, having his actors use natural, unforced American accents, might actually be far more authentically Homeric. It strips away the pretentious barrier between the audience and the raw emotion of the characters.
It stops them from sounding like marble statues and makes them sound like exhausted soldiers.
Exactly.
And honestly, despite all the furious online debates, or maybe fueled by them, I don't know, the hype for this deep dive subject is just astronomical. The numbers we are looking at are staggering.
The cultural footprint is immense. When the official trailer dropped, it racked up 121.4 million views across social media in its first 24 hours alone.
That is huge.
To put that into perspective, that is double the views that the Oppenheimer trailer received in that exact same time frame.
And the marketing integrations are everywhere. Like, Universal secured a massive advertisement during the Super Bowl LX pregame show.
Oh yeah, I saw that.
There's this viral TV spot right now featuring a dramatic reading of the text set to a brand new trap beat by Travis Scott. And he plays a literal bard in the commercial.
It is such an incredible juxtaposition of ancient poetry and modern hip-hop.
It really is. Plus, the movie theaters are heavily leaning into geeky collector culture. IMAX released a popcorn bucket designed to look exactly like a 70mm film camera.
Which sold out in hours, by the way.
Of course it did. And AMC has a popcorn container shaped like the Trojan horse.
But, you know, when you look past the Travis Scott commercials and the Trojan horse popcorn buckets, it brings us to the ultimate question for you, the listener.
Yeah.
Why should you invest your time in this? Why does a 3,000-year-old poem matter so intensely in the summer of 2026?
Yes. So what does this all mean?
It matters because beneath the IMAX cameras and the translation wars, this is the ultimate enduring story of human survival.
Richard.
Yes, it explores the devastating human cost of war and the psychological weight of arrogance. But more than that, epic myths survive because they act as a Rorschach test for whatever trauma a society is currently trying to process.
That's fascinating.
Right now, we are a society dealing with global anxiety, conflict, and a desperate universal drive to find our way back to a sense of home and stability. That emotional core is why we are crashing AMC servers for a Bronze Age myth.
That is profound. It proves that true epics don't survive by staying frozen in a museum. They survive by being endlessly retranslated, fiercely argued over, and radically reimagined for every single new generation.
Well said.
We've traced an incredible journey in this deep dive. We started with Homer's ancient blueprint and uncovered the gritty nuances of translating a word like polytropos with Emily Wilson.
Yeah, and we navigated the starkly different ways modern creators are interpreting the myth. From Kate Hamill's fierce stage critique that forces us to look at the collateral damage of war, to Christopher Nolan's massive IMAX exploration of a traumatized hero fighting his own hubris.
And we unpacked the intense cultural friction, the casting debates, and the sheer record-breaking box office frenzy surrounding the film.
Ultimately, whether you view Odysseus as a glorious hero or a deeply flawed man trying to outrun his past, the text remains a mirror reflecting our own modern anxieties.
Definitely.
And before we go, I want to leave you with one final thought to explore on your own. We spent a lot of time today talking about Odysseus and his famous cunning, his polytropos. We talked about the genius of the Trojan horse.
Right.
But consider Penelope. For 3 years, completely surrounded by violent men who had invaded her home, she wove a burial shroud during the day and secretly unwove it every single night to delay having to marry one of them.
Oh, wow.
Consider how her silent domestic act of unweaving was just as cunning, just as strategic, and just as much an act of heroic warfare as Odysseus hiding inside a wooden horse.
I love that perspective. The battlefield isn't always at Troy. Sometimes the greatest tactical warfare is happening right at the loom in your own home. Thank you so much for joining us on this exploration. See you again in the next episode of this podcast.